This is about sensitivity versus specificity. And this is a story about lie detectors that came up in the Washington Post. And this is a kind of a classic example in using probability in a way that's against our intuition, let's say that. So 10,000 people take a lie detector test, and let's assume 10 of them are spies, and 9,990 of them are not spies, or honest people. And it turns out that the research suggests that just under 1,600 people would fail the test, meaning that they would be shown to be lying, including 8 of the spies would be shown to be lying, and the other 2 spies would have passed, and the remaining people who weren't spies also would have passed. So let's just do the calculation here. So out of the 990 innocent people, 9,990 innocent people, 1,592 of them failed the test. And they're what we call false positives. They're people who tested positive for lying when they weren't. They weren't lying, they were telling the truth. And we calculate the percents at 16%, and that's what we call sensitivity is 100 minus that. So sensitivity is 84% sensitive. On the other hand, 8 of the 10 liars failed the test, and that gives us what we call specificity of 80%. So if you think about that, it sounds pretty good. 84 and 80 are pretty high numbers, but just because a lot of the spies are actually so infrequent in the population, you actually get the percentage of the spies in the pool of people who failed that test, okay? Who failed the test? Now we look for the spies. 8 out of 1,600 people, that's 0.5%. So in other words, it's really hard to find the spies, okay? And even though 80%, 84% sounds like, if you ask people how much do you think, how likely is it do you think that they'll get the spy there by looking in the pool of people who failed the test, who looked like they were lying, I think a lot of people would say, well, you know, maybe 75%. But in fact, it's 0.5%, so really small. All right, so now let me just say a couple more words about what we do. So we write op-eds. We speak on a lot of radio shows. We write letters to the editor, occasionally get published. We interview for television programs on their topics of interest. And we do ourselves some in-depth data-driven journalism that we hope serves as a model for a lot of journalists. We advise journalists. I'll spend a couple hours on the phone with somebody about their data questions. Sometimes they'll send me Excel charts, ask me questions about that. We've run some workshops. We provide an FAQ on our website, which has actually been picked up by the Annenberg School of Journalism. We run a website with some materials and a blog. We have occasionally testified to Congress about specific issues. We've done some polls on experts, like we've done some polls, for example, what do climatologists think about global warming, as opposed to what do journalists think about global warming, right? Okay, so kind of a different point of view. Again, I want to emphasize this point about really looking to the consensus of the scientific consensus as a means of what should be reported to the public, at least as the scientific consensus. If you want to say you're writing an article and you want to say what the fringe points of view are, or the slightly different points of view, maybe report both and talk about why that isn't accepted in the mainstream consensus yet. We also put out what's called dubious data awards. These are always a lot of fun. This year, this past just a couple weeks ago, we came up with the following. So we've got baby bottle baloney, which is when people all threw away their plastic bottles and bought glass ones based on fears of chemicals leaching out from the baby bottles that would cause obesity, among other things. It turned out that the lead scientist who's been touting this point of view has been dismissed by independent risk analyses in Europe. Treats, shoots, and misses. This is a study that was reported on in the New York Times, which suggested that U.S. healthcare is really dismal compared to other countries, and it turned out that a lot of the ways in which they came to this conclusion was based on patient satisfaction. So if Americans like to complain more than Europeans, then our healthcare is worse, rather than outcome measurements such as, what's the likelihood of living if you had a heart attack or something like that. I mentioned to you also about the CNN reporting on kids getting cancer from hot dogs. Another cute one was rainfall and autism, that increases in rainfall cause autism. And there they had done some study in the Seattle area and found this correlation, but it turned out that the correlation was very indirect. They had to come up with new measurements. They didn't find actually a direct link, but it was still reported on by USA Today. Toxic shower curtain smell. This is one that was reported in Los Angeles Times. They had done one last year on toxic new car smell. But again, this is the idea. So this is related to phthalates, which I mentioned earlier, that they were actually being emitted by shower curtains, and we were, getting death in the shower stall, like in the movie Psycho. But actually, it turns out that the level of measurements of what was being emitted from the curtains was below the detection level. So it was just the phthalates were in the curtains, but they actually didn't have any evidence of them being emitted from the curtains and giving us exposure while showering. Acupuncture and fertility. This one we got a lot of news agencies reported about the benefits of using acupuncture to improve fertility for women who were having trouble conceiving. It turns out that they actually confused something called the odds ratio with relative risk, and it turned out in this case that the benefits were much, much smaller than reported. And in fact, the lead author of the study was an acupuncturist. Again, latent sexism. Boston Globe reported that the latest research on the lack of women in science was because women were embracing the freedom to say no. So saying no to careers in science was the reason that women were not in science, not anything else. And that was, again, as I mentioned earlier, contrary to what most research by education professors have found with regard to why women are not staying in fields of science. But also it turns out that they didn't count biology. Okay. So
they decided biology wasn't really a science.
Biology was not really a science, and I think that's because 60% of the degrees went to women, so it no longer counted. Another cute one was New York Times reporting 1 million people live inside Dublin's official borders, which are such that you can literally walk anywhere in about half an hour. So we did a model to assume the city was circular shaped, and it had a diameter of approximately 2 miles, so that was about that was what they were essentially saying, and it turned out it would be therefore about 5 times more densely inhabited than Manhattan. It turns out that they misrepresented the size of Dublin by order of magnitude of about 12, and they also doubled the population. Another one was giving the finger to pixie dust, we called it. So apparently some guy had chopped off his finger and claimed that he had fixed it and it had regenerated by sprinkling pixie dust on it. And he had all these surgeons reporting on it. This was all over the press. But it turned out he actually only lost a piece of flesh, and it turned out also that those do regenerate. In case any of you should have a child like mine, you'd be happy to know this. So I finally wanted to finish up with a small video of kind of the real reason, which I hope came through in this lecture, to why I do this. I really like to live not in fear, but in knowledge. And I have a movie to suggest that. The movie's actually in French, but it has subtitles. And I'll finish with that.
Au Japon, on consomme peu de graisse et le nombre d'infarctus y est plus faible qu'aux États-Unis. En France, on consomme beaucoup de graisse et le nombre d'infarctus y est plus faible qu'aux États-Unis. En Inde, on boit peu de vin rouge et le nombre d'infarctus y est plus faible qu'aux États-Unis. En Espagne, on boit beaucoup de vin rouge et le nombre d'infarctus y est plus faible qu'aux États-Unis. Au Brésil, on fait beaucoup plus l'amour qu'en Algérie et le nombre d'infarctus des deux pays est plus faible qu'aux États-Unis. Conclusion, buvez, mangez, faites l'amour autant que vous voulez. Ce qui peut tuer, c'est parler anglais.